Hello there and welcome. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Perhaps you've felt that quiet unease that lingers after a long day, the thoughts that won't rest, the worries that whisper just before sleep. Tonight, we'll travel through a topic that humanity has wrestled with since the beginning: demons, not as creatures of horror, but as symbols of the unseen. The fears, temptations, and shadows that dwell in every story and sometimes within us. This isn't a tale meant to frighten you. It's a reflection, one told softly, slowly, and with reverence for the wisdom our ancestors left behind. For thousands of years, people across the world tried to understand the forces that stirred chaos in life. The sudden anger, the heavy sadness, the strange darkness that seemed to follow human hearts. The ancient Greeks called them daimons, spirits that could inspire or mislead. The Hebrews saw them as fallen beings, estranged from the light. Early Christians believed they were tempters, not to be feared, but to be overcome through truth and love, and philosophers saw them differently still, as mirrors of the self, reflections of what we must face and heal within. Each story, each name, was an attempt to explain what we all feel, that life holds both light and shadow. But tonight's journey isn't about fear. It's about understanding, because understanding turns darkness into language, and language into peace. So as you lie back and let your breathing slow, know that you are safe. You are surrounded not by shadow, but by calm. The same calm that comes when candlelight flickers gently against the walls of night. Let your mind rest as we wander through 100 ancient facts, stories of spirits, angels, and energies that shaped how humanity understood good and evil. You will hear how demons were once described not as monsters, but as metaphors, reminders that the greatest battles are often fought within, and that victory has always belonged to light. If the word demon once meant fear, tonight it will mean knowledge, a way to see that even darkness has something to teach. And by the end of this journey, you may find that the shadows were never enemies at all, only the parts of ourselves waiting to be known and brought back into balance. So close your eyes. Let the ancient stories wash over you like a distant tide. Let the wisdom of ages remind you, the light you seek does not need to be found. It already burns quietly within you. Tonight, we'll drift through 100 sleepy facts about demons, and in doing so, discover that peace is not the absence of darkness, but the understanding that light was never gone. Fact 1. Long before the word demon came to mean darkness, it meant something far more mysterious. In ancient Greece, the term daemon described a spirit between gods and men, not evil, but powerful, invisible, and unpredictable. Socrates himself spoke of a daimonion, a quiet voice that warned him when he strayed from truth. These beings were neither condemned nor adored. They were reminders that unseen forces shape human life. Only later did their image twist into something fearful. But even then, the old wisdom remained. What we call a demon is often an energy misunderstood, a reflection of imbalance, not malevolence. When brought into awareness, the shadow that once frightened becomes simply a teacher waiting to be heard. Fact 2. In ancient Mesopotamia, demons were thought to wander the edges of the world, at twilight, crossroads, or empty deserts. They were blamed for illness, nightmares, and sudden misfortune. To ward them off, people wore small clay seals etched with divine names or carried prayers pressed into tablets. But hidden beneath the superstition was a spiritual truth. The ancients knew fear thrives in the unknown. By naming their demons, they reclaimed power over them. Each amulet, each whispered incantation was not magic but mindfulness, a ritual to remind the soul that light is stronger than what haunts it. Even in their fear, they practiced faith, believing that divine presence walked beside them in every shadowed place. Fact 3. In early Hebrew writings, the wilderness was home to restless spirits. They called them shedim, beings of disorder who thrived where life was absent. The desert wind was their whisper, the heat their breath. Yet Scripture never spoke of them as equal to God's power. They were remnants of chaos, not rivals of creation. The lesson endures. Darkness exists only where order is forgotten. When the heart drifts without purpose, fear fills the silence. But the moment faith returns, the wilderness changes shape. From desolation to sanctuary, what once frightened becomes holy ground again. Even the ancient prophets understood no shadow can survive where divine light chooses to dwell. Fact 4. In early Christian thought, demons were not creatures of equal strength to angels, but fragments of light that had turned away from their source. They were the echoes of freedom misused, beings who once stood in radiance but chose pride instead of harmony. The story of their fall was never told to glorify darkness, but to remind humanity of choice. Every soul, like them, carries the ability to love or to withhold love. To fall, in the spiritual sense, is simply to forget where you belong. But even then, the path home remains open. No darkness is so deep that it cannot remember the way back to the light that birthed it. Fact 5. Lucifer's name, before it became a symbol of rebellion, meant light bringer. He was the morning star, a metaphor for brilliance that lost its balance. The old mystics said pride was the first shadow ever cast by light, the moment when self forgot its source. In this way, Lucifer's fall is not just a myth about angels, it's a mirror for human nature. Each time we believe our light is our own, we repeat that ancient fall. But humility restores what pride distorts. To kneel is not to shrink, it is to return to alignment. In bowing before the divine, light finds its center again. Fact 6. In the Gospels, demons often appear not as monsters, but as voices of torment, inner storms made visible. When Jesus meets a man possessed by a legion, he does not shout in fear, he asks his name. That question alone holds power. To name something is to see it clearly, and what is seen loses its grip. The man is restored, clothed, and at peace, while the restless spirits fade into silence. It is a story not of terror, but of healing, showing that even our fiercest darkness cannot withstand awareness wrapped in compassion. Christ does not fight shadows. He simply brings dawn, and the night remembers what light feels like. Fact 7. Some ancient teachers believed that demons could only cling to what was left unhealed. They were drawn not to purity or strength, but to wounds that had never been tended. Wherever resentment, fear, or pride remained, they found a place to whisper. But these whispers were never invincible, only persuasive. Prayer, forgiveness, and awareness were seen as lights that closed every doorway. The moment a heart faced its pain with love, the shadows had nowhere left to rest. It was never about power, but presence. For in the quiet company of divine peace, even the darkest spirits lose their language and fade back into nothingness. Fact 8. In the desert, monks of the early church spoke often of their battles with invisible tempters. They did not flee them. They listened, prayed, and waited. Each whisper of fear or pride became a mirror, showing what still lived inside their own hearts. They said that demons were loudest just before they disappeared, like waves crashing hardest before retreating. To them, victory came not by fighting, but by staying still. Through silence, temptation exhausted itself, and when peace finally returned, it was deeper than before, as if the soul had grown wider from having survived the storm. Fact 9. In medieval writings, demons were often painted with terrible faces, wings, and claws. But these were symbols, not sightings. Artists gave shape to what the human mind could not yet explain: greed, lust, anger, and despair. The ugliness of these figures was a reflection of the emotions they represented. It was not hell they were describing, but the soul in imbalance. Every snarling mask carved in stone was a warning that beauty fades when the heart turns inward on itself. Art became sermon, a reminder that the most terrifying demons are not out there, but within, and that every one of them can be transformed by grace. Fact 10. The Desert Fathers taught that demons could not enter a heart filled with gratitude. They said thanksgiving was like armor, soft yet impenetrable. Whenever they felt the weight of temptation or despair, they would whisper simple thanks for light, for breath, for being, and the heaviness would lift, for darkness feeds on complaint but starves in the presence of joy. Even a single sincere word of gratitude they believed could silence a legion of restless thoughts. Perhaps that's why peace feels closest when we count our blessings, because in doing so, we remember that love already surrounds us, even in the smallest, quietest ways. Fact 11. In the Old Testament, there is mention of a spirit that tormented King Saul, not as punishment, but as reflection. When Saul's pride and jealousy grew, the spirit found its home in him, and when David played the harp, the darkness fled. The lesson is simple yet eternal. Harmony dispels confusion. Music, like prayer, realigns the inner world. What could not be reasoned away could be soothed away. The ancients understood that sound itself is sacred, that a single note offered in peace carries the vibration of heaven. When the heart sings, even softly, no shadow can remain near. Fact 12. Many spiritual traditions describe demons as beings who dwell in chaos. Their nature, they say, is to divide, to turn thought against thought, neighbor against neighbor, heart against itself. But they can only thrive where unity has been forgotten. The cure, therefore, is always harmony, the remembrance that all things share the same divine origin. When we forgive, when we listen, when we choose compassion over judgment, the walls that fed them crumble. Even silence can become an exorcism when it's filled with love instead of anger. For where there is unity, there is peace, and where there is peace, there are no demons at all. Fact 13. In ancient Egypt, spiritual healers believed that demons could attach themselves to false words. Every lie, they said, created a small distortion in the harmony between soul and truth. When enough distortions gathered, illness or unrest would follow. To heal, one had to speak truth aloud, softly, slowly, even if it trembled. Honesty was not just virtue, it was medicine. Each confession was a cleansing of the unseen. They called it aligning the heart with Ma'at, the divine order of truth. Even now, we can feel this wisdom. Every time we speak truth with humility, we bring light into the spaces where deception once tried to dwell. Fact 14. Some traditions say that demons are not fallen angels, but thoughts without love. They are born whenever envy, bitterness, or rage are left unattended. They drift between people like cold winds, seeking hearts that will listen. But love, even the smallest act of kindness, changes their nature. What was once destructive becomes gentle when met with compassion. It's as if the darkness itself is desperate to be forgiven. The old mystics taught that every negative force longs for its return to the light. By loving what we fear, we help creation remember what it was meant to be, whole, healed, and luminous again. Fact 15. In Christian mysticism, it is said that pride opens the first door to darkness, but humility closes them all. Pride whispers, "You are enough on your own." Humility answers, "I was never meant to be alone." The proud heart resists grace. The humble one receives it easily, like soil welcoming rain. Demons, they said, have no power over those who kneel in truth, for surrender is strength disguised. When we release the need to control, peace finds room to enter, and in that quiet acceptance, all that is false fades away, not by force, but by the soft and steady light of divine love. Fact 16. Early theologians believed that demons thrived in noise, in the constant hum of distraction that pulls the mind away from the present moment. That's why monks sought silence, not as escape, but as shield. In stillness, the false voices lose their echo. The more one listens inwardly, the clearer the divine whisper becomes. Modern life, with all its clamor and motion, can make the old wisdom easy to forget, but silence is still sacred. Even now, a few quiet breaths, a single moment of calm awareness can become an act of exorcism. For in the heart that remembers to be still, every shadow simply runs out of places to hide. Fact 17, some mystics describe demons as energies without rest, forever moving, forever hungry. They are the echoes of desires that never find fulfillment. To them, sin was not crime, but imbalance, the endless chase for what cannot satisfy. Peace, then, was their opposite. To live contently was the highest form of defense. Simplicity became sanctity, because it left no doorway open for craving to enter. The saints who owned little and loved much were untouchable, their joy too quiet to disturb. In that lesson lies a gentle truth. Stillness is not emptiness. It is abundance, resting in peace. Fact 18. In the writings of St. Anthony, the father of monasticism, demons appeared as illusions, terrifying visions meant to test the soul's courage. He would see monstrous forms rise before him in the desert night, but he would sit unmoved, whispering only, "The Lord is my light." When he showed no fear, the illusions vanished like smoke. He taught that fear was their only weapon. Once the heart stayed calm, their power dissolved. This became the foundation of early Christian spiritual warfare. Not shouting or struggle, but steadfast peace. Even now, courage in stillness remains the purest form of strength. Calm is the armor that nothing can pierce. Fact 19. Ancient texts often describe demons as whisperers of doubt. They never shouted, they suggested. Their voices blended with our own thoughts, speaking softly of inadequacy and fear. Yet even those whispers carried a lesson. They revealed where faith was fragile, where trust needed tending. The early mystics learned not to argue with such thoughts, but to notice them and then breathe. Awareness, they said, was the first light of prayer. When you can see the thought as separate from your true self, its power dissolves. Every time you choose to listen to love instead of fear, the ancient whisper grows quieter until the only voice that remains is peace. Fact 20. In Jewish mysticism, it was believed that pride gives birth to fallen spirits. Every act of arrogance, they taught, creates a distortion in the fabric of creation, but each act of humility repairs it. This process of healing the world is called tikkun olam, the restoration of divine harmony. Even the smallest kindness contributes to this repair. By lifting one another gently, we undo what darkness divides. Evil cannot thrive in a heart busy with compassion. The sages said that love is not the opposite of hate, it is the cure for it. Each merciful act stitches light back into the torn cloth of existence. Fact 21. When Christ was tempted in the wilderness, the Gospels say he was led there by the Spirit, a reminder that even temptation can serve purpose. The devil offered him power, fame, and comfort, but Jesus answered each time with scripture and silence. He did not fight, he remained. In that steadfastness, the tempter lost interest and fled. This story is less about cosmic battle and more about inner mastery. It shows that every test is an invitation to know ourselves more deeply. Temptation is not proof of weakness. It is opportunity for strength to awaken. And strength, in God's language, always sounds like peace. Fact 22. Some early mystics said that demons often wear the disguise of urgency. They rush the soul, push the heart, and whisper, "You must act now." But true guidance never hurries. The divine moves with patience, not pressure. They taught that when a thought feels anxious or forced, it is not from God. So they waited, breathing, listening, and allowing clarity to unfold in its own time. In their stillness, false urgency melted away, revealing peace underneath. It was their way of discerning spirits. Whatever leads to calm is light, whatever leads to panic is shadow. Even today, wisdom begins the moment we remember that nothing sacred ever demands haste. Fact 23. In ancient Christian writings, the 7 deadly sins were often described not as actions, but as spirits. Pride, envy, greed, wrath, lust, gluttony, and sloth. Each was seen as a subtle presence that whispered in the human heart. They were called the 7 gates of the soul. But the cure was not punishment. It was transformation. Humility dissolved pride. Charity healed greed. Patience quieted wrath. Love was the alchemy that turned poison into light. The saints taught that virtue is not born from fear of sin, but from joy and goodness. And the more one lived in love, the less room there was for anything else to stay. Fact 24. Medieval theologians believed that demons feared laughter. They said joy was proof that despair had failed. In monasteries, brothers would sometimes tell gentle jokes after prayer to remind one another that holiness need not be solemn. A joyful spirit, they believed, was one that could not be possessed. For laughter, when kind and pure, is a melody of heaven, the sound of creation remembering its innocence. Even sorrow softens in its presence. Where joy abides, darkness loses form. The heart that can still laugh in the face of difficulty has already won a quiet victory. Light does not always roar. Sometimes it simply smiles. Fact 25. Ancient healers taught that the body and soul mirror one another, and that demons could dwell not in flesh, but in the emotions left unhealed. Anger, guilt, envy. These were seen as doorways where peace had forgotten to live. Their remedy was compassion, for oneself first and then for others. They believed that love, practiced in small daily ways, restored harmony to both the body and the spirit. When forgiveness entered, the unseen imbalance disappeared. This wasn't superstition, it was sacred psychology. To heal emotion was to cleanse the spirit. And when the heart forgave, the old heaviness, what they called a demon, simply had nowhere left to go but home. Fact 26. In the writings of St. Augustine, he warned that the greatest trick of darkness was imitation. Demons, he said, could mimic virtue, humility that was pride in disguise, or faith that sought recognition. But imitation always trembles under truth. Real love does not perform, it endures quietly. To discern, one must look not at the action, but at the peace that follows. If a choice leaves the heart calm, it comes from light. If it stirs restlessness, it does not. Augustine's wisdom reminds us, even good things can wear false masks, but the soul that listens will always know. For peace is the only voice that never deceives. Fact 27. In Persian mysticism, darkness was not seen as an enemy, but as the canvas for light. The night sky existed, so stars could shine. Evil, they said, was not eternal. It was simply the absence of remembrance. The moment one remembered their divine origin, the shadows fell away like mist. Light does not fight darkness, it reveals it. And once revealed, darkness ceases to be. In this way, the sages taught that the universe itself is a slow sunrise. Each act of goodness another ray. The dawn is inevitable, they said. No matter how long the night, light always keeps its promise. Fact 28. The ancient desert monks often said that demons cannot read the heart, they can only guess. They study patterns, watching what frightens, what angers, what tempts, but they are powerless against honesty. A heart that hides nothing leaves no place for deception to cling. So they practice confession not as guilt, but as light, opening their inner world to God without fear. In that transparency, shadows had no foothold. They learned that the purest strength was vulnerability, for a heart that tells the truth, even to itself, becomes invisible to darkness, shining too brightly for falsehood to approach. Fact 29. Medieval mystics wrote that demons dwell in memory. They haunt the regrets we replay, the moments we wish had gone differently. But these too are illusions, ghosts of thought feeding on what is already past. To free oneself, they said, is to bless the past and let it rest. Each mistake becomes sacred when we use it to learn compassion. They taught that remembrance can either bind or liberate, depending on whether we hold it. With judgment or love, when we forgive ourselves, memory transforms from tormentor into teacher. Even the darkest recollection becomes gentle once it is embraced in mercy. Fact 30. Ancient scholars of light believed that every demon, if traced far enough back, began as a longing for goodness. Corruption, they said, is not born evil. It is simply desire turned inward. Every fallen angel once sought beauty, but forgot where beauty truly came from. This teaching offered hope rather than fear. If evil is merely love misplaced, then redemption is always possible. Nothing in creation is beyond return. Even the darkest force still remembers, deep down, the warmth of its first light. And so, through love, the universe endlessly calls its own shadows home. Fact 31. In Tibetan tradition, there is a practice called chod, where monks face the spirits they fear most by offering them compassion instead of resistance. They visualize their demons, hunger, anger, pain, and feed them love. What begins as terror dissolves into stillness, for nothing dark can survive being fully accepted. They teach that fear is only energy asking to be understood. By facing it with kindness, one reclaims their power. This is not submission to evil, but mastery through mercy. To love what once frightened you is to illuminate it, and illumination in any form is victory. Every shadow that's met with peace eventually forgets how to be a shadow. Fact 32. In the Gospel accounts, Jesus often met those tormented by spirits. Yet he never treated them with cruelty. He spoke, he listened, and he commanded peace. His authority was gentleness, not aggression. The afflicted found rest because his presence carried no judgment, only truth. This teaches a sacred paradox. Evil collapses not before punishment, but before compassion. To truly heal is to see suffering without hatred. The light of Christ does not chase darkness. It reveals its falseness and renders it powerless. Even now, love remains the greatest exorcism. Wherever divine understanding enters, torment ends, and the soul remembers its calm again. Fact 33. In ancient Sumerian lore, it was believed that spirits of disorder could only dwell in forgotten places, empty homes, untended altars, neglected hearts. So people filled their spaces with prayer, music, and offerings of gratitude, not because the gods demanded it, but because joy itself was protection. They understood that where reverence lives, chaos cannot stay. This principle survives even now. Light doesn't have to fight darkness. It only needs to shine. Every moment of beauty, every breath of thanks strengthens the boundaries of peace. When we tend to our inner temple, even quietly, no unholy thing can linger there. Joy is still the oldest form of armor. Fact 34. In the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, she described the devil as a shadow outside the soul's castle. He could knock, whisper, even tempt, but he could never enter unless invited. Her great insight was that fear gives permission where faith denies it. She taught that prayer and humility turn the key that locks every door. When the soul remembers who truly reigns within, the darkness loses all claim. To live in grace, she said, is to dwell in a fortress of peace built from trust. No shadow, no voice, no fear can cross the threshold where love stands watch. Faith itself is a wall of light. Fact 35. In Islamic theology, there is a story of the jinn, unseen beings made of smokeless fire. Some are good, some are lost, and some wander between. Their tale reminds believers that creation is vast and layered, filled with mysteries beyond sight. But the Quran teaches that remembrance of God protects from all harm. The phrase Bismillah, in the name of God, is a shield of light spoken softly. It affirms that all power belongs to the Creator, not to the creature. Even when shadows move unseen, faith turns awareness toward the source of peace. To remember God is to forget fear. Fact 36. The philosopher Plato spoke of a guiding daemon, an inner spirit that whispered truth to the conscience. It was not a tempter, but a companion, the voice of moral intuition. Later ages would forget its gentleness and turn the daimon into a demon. But Plato's lesson remains timeless. Not every inner voice is to be feared. Discernment means listening for the tone of peace, the sign of divine counsel. Fear commands, wisdom invites. When we act from calm certainty, we follow the true spirit within. Perhaps our conscience is still that quiet messenger, the echo of heaven reminding us how to walk in light. Fact 37. In Eastern Christian mysticism, the monks of Mount Athos spoke of a practice called nepsis, watchfulness of the heart. They believed that demons entered through distraction, through thoughts accepted without awareness. To guard the mind, they whispered the Jesus prayer with every breath, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. It became a rhythm, a heartbeat of light. With time, the prayer no longer needed words. It simply was. In this stillness, the mind became like calm water, and no shadow could reflect upon it. Their teaching endures. Attention is protection. To live awake in each moment is to leave no doorway open for darkness to dwell. Fact 38. In some Native American stories, what others might call demons were seen instead as trickster spirits. Not purely evil, but teachers in disguise. They disrupted pride, exposed greed, and reminded people of humility. When a person grew arrogant, the trickster would appear in mischief to restore balance. These stories taught that even chaos can serve creation. The spirits we fear may be lessons in patience and compassion. In this way, every challenge becomes sacred. What the West called demonic, many traditions called medicine, the soul's way of healing itself by showing us what must be understood. Fact 39. The early mystic Evagrius Ponticus taught that the battle with demons takes place not in the sky, but in the mind. Every harmful thought, he said, has a voice, but not every voice deserves your attention. He mapped 8 patterns of temptation, seeds of the 7 deadly sins that later took form. His counsel was simple: observe, don't engage. When a thought arises, see it, breathe, and let it pass like smoke. To argue is to invite it in. To witness is to let it go. He compared the disciplined mind to a still pond, clear, reflective, untouched by the dust of fear. Fact 40. In the story of Job, demons do not appear as creatures, but as permission, the allowance of suffering to refine faith. Job loses everything, yet his heart remains turned toward God. Through grief, confusion, and silence, he learns that faith does not depend on comfort. The adversary's goal was doubt, but endurance became victory. Job's peace was not immediate. It was born through surrender. The lesson is profound. Sometimes darkness is not punishment, but purification. When the storm passes, what remains is unshakable trust. Even when the world breaks around you, or what is real cannot be taken, the quiet center that still whispers, I am with you. Fact 41. In Renaissance art, angels and demons were often painted together, not as opposites, but as reflections. Artists saw them as 2 sides of the same mystery, the light and shadow of the soul. Every brushstroke of darkness made the brightness shine more deeply. This was not a celebration of evil, but an acknowledgement of wholeness. Without contrast, there is no clarity. Without shadow, light loses depth. The great painters understood what mystics had long known, that redemption is woven through imperfection and beauty is born from contrast. Every flaw becomes sacred when it helps reveal the brilliance of grace. Fact 42. The theologian Thomas Aquinas believed that demons, though fallen, still serve the order of divine justice. Even rebellion, he wrote, cannot escape purpose, for though they seek chaos, they unwittingly strengthen the faithful by testing them. Through resistance, the soul grows steady, like gold refined by fire. In this paradox lies comfort. Evil cannot win, because even its existence feeds the victory of good. All things, in time, are drawn into the service of light. Aquinas saw the cosmos as a harmony too vast to be broken, a design where even discord becomes music when heard from eternity's ear. Fact 43. In the book of Tobit, the archangel Raphael drives away a demon that tormented a family, not through battle, but through healing. He guides, restores, and blesses, showing that deliverance often comes through compassion, not conflict. The angel's very name means God heals. This story reminds us that divine help rarely arrives with thunder, but with tenderness. Healing is heaven's quiet answer to fear. When Raphael breathes peace into the house, the darkness departs without struggle. It is the same in every soul. When love enters fully, evil simply has no air left to breathe. Light doesn't fight darkness, it replaces it. Fact 44. In medieval lore, people believed that holy water could drive demons away, but saints clarified the truth. It was never the water itself, but the faith it symbolized. Water was chosen because it cleanses, renews, and sustains life. When blessed, it became a reminder that God's grace flows everywhere. Each drop spoke of purity, reborn. To sprinkle it was to remember that the soul could always begin again. Even now that image endures, a simple substance transformed by meaning. For in faith, every ordinary thing can become extraordinary. Even water can shine with divine light. Fact 45, the mystic Julian of Norwich once wrote, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." She lived through plague, loss, and fear, yet her visions revealed a God untouched by despair. To her, demons were shadows cast by misunderstanding, nothing more. Evil had no eternity, only love did. Her words became medicine for centuries of souls. They remind us that faith is not denial of pain, but trust in the outcome. Even when the world trembles, divine order holds. The night may linger, but it cannot last. For love, she said, is the meaning behind everything that exists. Fact 46. Early mystics believed that demons thrived on despair, but hope was poison to them. They said a single spark of hope could undo centuries of darkness. Even when faith feels small, it carries immeasurable power. Hope is light that refuses to die, even when covered in ash. It does not deny sorrow, it simply endures it. The saints called hope the seed of resurrection, proof that the soul remembers its source. To whisper, "Still, I trust," in the midst of ruin, is to strike fear into the heart of despair itself. Hope is not noise, it is quiet defiance, and it always calls the dawn. Fact 47. In ancient iconography, demons were often painted beneath the feet of saints, not because the saints fought them, but because they walked in peace above them. Their stillness was the victory. They had no need to curse or conquer. They simply remained in divine alignment. Where holiness walked, fear could not. This imagery spoke a deep truth. Peace is authority. A soul anchored in love does not need to resist evil. It transcends it. When your heart stands firm in light, darkness becomes merely the shadow cast by your own radiance. Victory has always looked like calm. Fact 48. The Jewish Talmud teaches that the evil impulse, the Yetzer Hara, is not to be destroyed, but guided. Without it, humans would never build, create, or love passionately. Even the drive that tempts us can serve good when disciplined by wisdom. The sages believed that holiness was not separation from desire, but transformation of it. They prayed not to be emptied of will, but to be filled with right intention. This teaching turns the whole struggle upside down. Darkness is not the enemy, but the raw material of light. In every temptation lies energy waiting to be sanctified. Fact 49. Ancient mystics said that demons fear silence more than prayer, because silence is prayer perfected. The state where the soul no longer speaks, but simply is. In silence, truth becomes audible and lies dissolve. Many sought to fill their prayers with words, yet the wisest monks sat quietly, breathing in presence. They believed the heart that rests in stillness becomes untouchable. For noise is the language of confusion, but silence belongs to eternity. When you stop running from the moment and allow yourself to simply be, the shadows realize they have no audience, and in that holy quiet, light remembers your name. Fact 50. The Desert Fathers taught that every temptation has a gift hidden within it. Anger invites forgiveness, fear invites courage, pride invites humility. The purpose of darkness is to reveal where the soul can grow. They compared the devil to a trainer, unaware that by testing, he strengthens the one he tries to break. Thus, temptation becomes education. Every shadow points to the skill of the light it resists, and so the saints smiled at hardship, knowing what it secretly was, a disguised opportunity to deepen grace. Even darkness, when faced with faith, becomes a servant of light. Fact 51. In Buddhist teaching, Mara, the tempter who confronted the Buddha, is not an external demon, but the embodiment of fear, doubt, and distraction. When Mara appeared beneath the Bodhi tree, the Buddha simply touched the earth and said, "I am here." In that moment, truth became his defense. He did not banish Mara, he acknowledged him, and by being seen, the illusion vanished. The story endures as a symbol of awakening. That enlightenment is not escape from darkness, but awareness within it. When we meet our fears without resistance, they lose their form. Every shadow fades in the light of simple presence. Fact 52. In Hebrew tradition, names hold power, for to name a thing is to bring it into light. That is why the prophets, when confronting darkness, often asked, "Who are you?" Naming exposes illusion. When confusion becomes clear, it loses its dominion. The same is true within us. Every unnamed fear controls us quietly, but once spoken, it shrinks. The ancients understood the spiritual law, that awareness itself is a kind of exorcism. So they prayed not only for protection, but for clarity. They knew that truth, once seen, cannot be unlearned. And the moment a shadow is called by its name, it ceases to be shadow at all. Fact 53. In Celtic Christianity, it was said that angels and demons both walk beside each soul at dawn and dusk, the two times when worlds seem to meet. The task of the believer was simply to choose which voice to heed. Light and darkness both whisper, but only one leads to peace. They called this the listening hour, when prayer carried the weight of the day. Through it, they learned discernment, the art of recognizing the voice of love. The test was never grand. It was subtle, daily, human. To listen well, they said, is holier than to speak, for silence chooses its companions wisely. Fact 54. In early Eastern texts, demons were described as beings that cannot create. They imitate, distort, and echo, but they cannot make anything new. Only light has creativity because it comes from love. This was considered the surest way to recognize falsehood. It lacks life. Wherever something drains, divides, or discourages, it is not of the divine. Creation, even in the smallest form, always expands and renews. The soul aligned with love leaves beauty in its wake. No darkness can imitate that. For the fruit of peace is unmistakable. Even the simplest act of kindness is proof that light is still creating through you. Fact 55. In medieval theology, scholars wrote that demons feed on neglect, of prayer, of kindness, of care. They cannot survive in a heart that remembers love. Neglect creates emptiness, and emptiness invites noise. That is why rituals of daily devotion existed, not as duty, but as remembrance. Lighting a candle, whispering a psalm, showing mercy. Each act kept the soul awake. They believed that attention was sacred protection. For when a person tends to their spirit as faithfully as to a garden, weeds cannot overgrow. Darkness withers in a mind that remembers light daily, even in the smallest ways. Fact 56. St. Francis of Assisi once said that demons fear joy more than prayer or fasting, because joy proves that despair has failed. He laughed often, sang hymns with the wind, and thanked God for the sun, the moon, and the smallest creatures of earth. His joy was not denial. It was rebellion. It declared that the soul is free even when the world is heavy. He believed that every smile in the face of suffering was a sermon louder than any shout. For demons dwell in sorrow, but flee from gratitude. Joy, when it is pure, is an unshakable fortress of light. Fact 57. The mystics of Kabbalah taught that when creation shattered, sparks of divine light scattered throughout the world. Demons, they said, are nothing more than shards of holiness wrapped in confusion. To hate them is to misunderstand them. To heal them is to return them to their source. Every act of goodness redeems a fragment. When you forgive, you gather light. When you bless instead of curse, another spark returns home. This vision transformed evil from something to fear into something to mend. The universe, they said, is waiting for us to remember it whole again. Redemption is not distant. It happens one kind act at a time. Fact 58. In early Christian legend, a monk once asked an angel how to defeat demons. The angel replied, "Do not fight them. Feed the hungry, comfort the sad, forgive your enemies." For every act of love weakens the kingdom of hate. The monk understood that evil cannot survive in a world filled with compassion. Love doesn't destroy darkness, it renders it irrelevant. Each good deed lights a candle that burns beyond sight. The lesson is as simple as it is eternal. When you love greatly, you participate in divine warfare without ever lifting a sword. Kindness, quietly given, is heaven's loudest victory. Fact 59. In some monastic traditions, demons were believed to flee from beauty. Chant, art, and sacred architecture were not luxuries but weapons of light. When the monks sang, they filled the air with harmony so pure that discord could not remain. They believed that beauty itself was proof of God, order born from chaos. Every fresco, every psalm, every candle flame was an act of defiance against despair, for ugliness breeds in neglect, but beauty is prayer made visible. Even today, when you create something honest and kind, you participate in that same resistance. To make beauty is to remind darkness that it has already lost. Fact 60. St. John Chrysostom taught that demons cannot endure mercy. He said the moment a person forgives, they stand on holy ground, because forgiveness ends the endless cycle where hatred feeds itself. It unhooks the chain that keeps the heart bound to bitterness. To forgive does not excuse, it releases. It allows love to flow freely again where pain once lived. Mercy, he said, is God's greatest weapon, gentle, patient, unstoppable. When you forgive, you echo heaven's own language, and in that echo, all that is false falls silent, for nothing unholy can dwell where mercy has taken root. Fact 61. Ancient scholars wrote that demons cling to fear, but faith unties their grasp. They compared fear to fog. It seems thick until light shines through. Faith does not always remove the unknown, it makes the unknown safe to walk through. When the heart trusts, the mind quiets, and the shadows lose form. To believe in divine goodness, even when unseen, is to dissolve the grip of all lesser powers. The old teachers said that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to trust love more than terror. And the moment you remember this, the fog begins to clear, revealing that you were never truly lost. Fact 62. Some early mystics saw sleep itself as a holy act, a small rehearsal of surrender. They believed that demons sought restlessness while angels guarded peace. Each night they would pray not for dreams but for stillness, for in rest the soul returns to the rhythm of creation, where all things are held and healed. They taught that sleep is the body's way of remembering grace, an act of trust that the world continues even as we close our eyes. To rest deeply is to declare faith without words. It is to say, I am safe in the hands of God, and drift gently into his keeping. Fact 63. In Sufi teaching, the devil's greatest sadness is distance from love. He longs for light, yet cannot face it. The mystics say that each soul must choose whether to pity or despise him, and that pity is stronger. Compassion, they believed, heals everything it touches. When you respond to darkness with empathy, you remind creation of its origin. Sufis spoke of ishq, divine love so powerful it transforms even sorrow into worship. They saw all things, even shadows, as pathways back to unity. To love what seems unlovable is to echo God's own mercy, and in that echo, darkness forgets how to exist. Fact 64. In Japanese Buddhist lore, there are tales of hungry spirits called gaki, beings forever craving what they cannot have. They wander with empty bellies and long necks, symbolizing endless desire. Yet their stories were told not to terrify, but to teach compassion. Monks would leave offerings of rice and water, prayers of kindness for those still lost in greed. The ritual reminded them that mercy nourishes even what seems hopeless. Every craving, they said, is a prayer misunderstood, a longing for love that forgot its name. When met with compassion, even hunger learns to rest, and the restless spirit finds its way home. Fact 65. The book of Ephesians speaks of a spiritual armor. Truth, righteousness, peace, faith, and salvation. It was never meant as armor for battle, but as a metaphor for awareness. Each virtue guards the soul from deception. Truth keeps illusions from entering. Peace keeps chaos from ruling, faith shields from despair. This armor has no weight, no sound, only presence. It is worn not by warriors, but by those who choose gentleness over aggression. The early Christians knew what many forget. Strength is not resistance, it is remembrance. To stand firm in light is the only defense the darkness has never learned to breach. Fact 66. The mystics of the desert often describe the devil as the great imitator. He could not create joy, but he could mimic it, turning pleasure into addiction, confidence into pride, curiosity into doubt. His illusions were not meant to frighten, but to distract. They taught that the surest way to see through deception was gratitude, for gratitude keeps the heart awake to what is real. Every thank you clears the fog of confusion. They said the devil has no answer to thanksgiving. It is the one sound that silences him completely. A grateful soul, they believed, shines too brightly to be deceived by anything false. Fact 67. In Hindu philosophy, darkness is described as tamas, the energy of inertia, confusion, and sleep. It is not evil, but a state of imbalance. When tamas rules, the mind forgets its own brilliance. The remedy is awareness, the spark of sattva, or clarity, which brings light to the dullness. The sages taught that these energies are always shifting like seasons. When you wake from despair, you are moving from tamas to sattva. In this view, even darkness becomes teacher, guiding you toward balance. No part of the soul is wasted. Every shadow, when understood, becomes a path back to the dawn. Fact 68. Saint Isaac the Syrian once wrote that demons flee from humility as sparks from the sea. He said that a humble heart is a calm ocean, vast, unshakable, reflecting heaven. Pride, by contrast, is brittle. It breaks beneath its own noise. Humility is not self-hatred, but quiet strength, the knowledge that all good comes from God. When the soul bows, light fills it completely. The proud heart closes. The humble one becomes a window. And through that window, grace shines freely into the world. To be humble is to be untouchable, because nothing can fall lower than love that already kneels. Fact 69. In medieval stories, it was said that demons could not cross a threshold marked by hospitality. Where kindness was given freely, darkness could not enter. Travelers would be invited inside, offered bread, warmth, and prayer. These customs were more than tradition. They were protection through generosity. They believed every stranger carried a spark of the divine, and to welcome one was to welcome God himself. Hospitality then was not social courtesy, it was sacred warfare through compassion. Even now, every act of kindness toward a stranger is a candle lit against the night. The home filled with welcome becomes a fortress of peace. Fact 70. In the Gnostic texts, darkness is described as ignorance, not moral evil, but forgetfulness of origin. They believed the soul's fall was a descent into amnesia, and salvation was remembrance. Knowledge, or gnosis, was light restored. To awaken was to remember who you truly are, a spark of divine essence. They taught that ignorance breeds fear, and fear gives shape to false powers. But once the soul recalls its source, all illusions fade like mist before sunrise. The battle between good and evil, they said, is simply the journey from forgetting to remembering, and every act of awareness, no matter how small, is another sunrise for the spirit. Fact 71. The early desert monks observed that demons grow quiet in the presence of compassion. When they felt attacked by unseen forces, they prayed for their enemies, even for the tempter himself. They believed that to love what is unlovable disarms it completely. Love leaves nothing to feed on, nothing to resist. It transforms hostility into hunger for light. This is why the saints never fought darkness with anger, only with mercy. Compassion is divine alchemy. It changes the battlefield into a sanctuary, and in the presence of unconditional love, even evil begins to remember that it was once part of the light. Fact 72. In the Gospel story of Mary Magdalene, 7 demons are said to have left her. But the number 7 symbolized completion, the total freeing of the soul. Her deliverance was not just from spirits, but from shame, fear, and pain. In her healing, she became one of the first witnesses of a resurrection. Her story teaches that no darkness is final, and no past too heavy to transform. Every wound can become witness. What was once broken can speak of light to others still in shadow. The same voice, once silenced by guilt, became the first to proclaim, "He is risen." Redemption is always personal, always possible. Fact 73. In the writings of St. Benedict, the struggle with demons was called the work of stability. He taught that when temptation arose, the answer was not escape, but endurance. "Stay where you are," he told his monks, "and your heart will grow larger than your fear." He understood that peace is not found by running from darkness, but by remaining steady until light returns. Demons, he said, thrive on impatience. They fade when we refuse to flee. Stillness, not strength, defeats them. Each moment of patience is a silent victory, another stone added to the monastery of the soul. For faith, when unmoving, is stronger than any storm. Fact 74. In the poetry of Rumi, demons represent the parts of us still calling for love. He wrote, "Welcome them all, even sorrow, even shame, for each has been sent as a guide from beyond." He saw every discomfort as an unopened letter from God. To turn away from darkness, he said, is to miss the lesson it brings. Love does not exile pain. It listens to it until it turns to song. This teaching softens the world. Every shadow becomes an invitation, every wound a doorway. What we fear most often hides what we need most to heal. Through love, even demons can teach us to pray. Fact 75. In early Christian art, halos were painted not only above saints, but around entire scenes of holiness. The artists wanted to show that light was contagious, that grace expands wherever goodness dwells. They believed demons could not endure sacred beauty, because beauty reminded them of what they had lost. To surround life with reverence was to keep despair at bay. Every illuminated manuscript, every candlelit chapel was a shield of radiance. Even now, you can feel this power in art, music, and kindness. The gentle hum of the divine through creation. To create beauty is to build walls of light the night cannot cross. Fact 76. In ancient Coptic writings, the Desert Fathers warned that demons rarely appear as monsters. More often, they arrive disguised as thoughts of despair. It is too late. You are unworthy. There is no hope. They said these words are the true possession of the soul, but each lie unravels when met with truth. You are loved. You are forgiven. You still matter. The Fathers taught that remembrance of divine mercy is the light that chases every falsehood away. For despair is not a fact, but a forgetting. The moment you recall that goodness still surrounds you, darkness loses its voice and vanishes like smoke and morning air. Fact 77. In the writings of St. Macarius, it is said that a soul filled with prayer becomes fire, and fire consumes shadow. He described the presence of God as warmth that melts fear, anger, and pride. When the heart burns with love, no impurity can survive within it. He taught that holiness is not cold perfection, but radiant compassion. When you pray with sincerity, even the smallest light grows fierce enough to purify. You need not be perfect to shine. You need only be open, for divine fire does not destroy, it refines. Every prayer, whispered softly, feeds the flame that keeps the darkness away. Fact 78. In the Jewish Talmud, it is written that he who saves a single life saves the entire world. The sages believed that acts of mercy ripple through creation, weakening every power of cruelty. They said demons shrink each time kindness is chosen over apathy. Goodness, though small, multiplies endlessly. So one candle may seem small, but its light can ignite countless others. They taught that heaven and hell are not distant realms, but choices repeated daily. When we lift one soul, even our own, we tilt the balance of the whole universe toward light. Redemption begins quietly, in ordinary acts of care. Fact 79. In some Christian traditions, it was said that demons cannot stand the sound of true worship, not because of the melody, but because of the surrender it represents. When a heart praises freely, darkness loses its grip. Worship turns fear into harmony. It's not the voice, but the humility behind it that silences evil. Even a whispered thank you carries divine resonance. The saints taught that joy offered to God is like incense, invisible yet powerful, rising through unseen worlds. Where gratitude and reverence dwell, despair cannot linger. Every act of worship, however small, is a reminder that light never left. It was simply waiting to be sung awake. Fact 80. In Taoist philosophy, harmony is the antidote to chaos. They did not speak of demons as enemies, but as energies out of balance. Yin without yang, desire without wisdom. The sage's task was not to destroy, but to realign. Through breath, stillness, and gentle awareness, even the wildest forces could find peace. They believed that every imbalance is just a request for restoration. To fight chaos is to feed it. To understand it is to calm it. The Tao flows through both light and dark, teaching that wholeness includes all things. When balance is restored, what once seemed evil becomes part of the dance again. Fact 81. In Jewish mysticism, every word of Scripture was said to carry divine light, even the ones that spoke of darkness. They believed demons could not approach a person reciting sacred words because the vibration of truth itself formed a shield. Reading the Torah aloud was not merely study, but protection. Each syllable, when spoken with faith, became a small flame against fear. This was the deeper meaning of meditation, to keep the tongue, mind, and heart aligned with holiness. They taught that the world began with a word, and that same word still sustains it. To speak with love is to echo creation's first sound. Fact 82. In the writings of the early mystics, they said demons thrive on forgetfulness, when people forget who they are and whom they belong to. They called this spiritual amnesia. The cure was remembrance, not of rules, but of relationship. To remember love is to awaken from fear. They advise believers to recall, even in hardship, that they are made of divine breath. Every prayer of gratitude reawakens that truth. When the soul remembers its origin, darkness cannot deceive it. For a heart aware of its creator is like a lamp that never goes out. Memory of light is stronger than any night that follows. Fact 83. In early Eastern Orthodox hymns, demons were described as shadows fleeing before the morning star. They believed that praise at dawn carried special power, for it joined human voices with the rising light. The monks would chant as the sun broke the horizon, their voices merging with the first gold of day. This daily ritual was not to chase away evil, but to welcome illumination. They knew that light does not fight darkness, it simply appears, and when it does, all shadows dissolve on their own. To greet the morning with faith is to let the soul rise with the sun. Fact 84. In the writings of Saint Gregory, he said that demons flee from gentleness. They feed on anger and harshness, but have no answer to calm love. When wronged, he taught, answer softly. When accused, remain patient. Such responses confuse the darkness, which expects resistance. Gentleness is divine strength, a quiet authority that cannot be provoked. The saints did not conquer through might, but through meekness. Every moment you choose softness over spite, you inherit their power. For nothing disarms evil faster than a heart that stays kind. Kindness is the voice through which heaven still speaks. Fact 85. Ancient mystics taught that demons cannot touch the soul that practices awareness. They said the mind is like a house with many doors, and attention decides which ones stay open. If your thoughts wander into fear, the door creaks wide. If you return to peace, it closes. Their wisdom was simple. Stay awake inside yourself. Awareness itself is divine light. It watches, it knows, it doesn't react. The moment you notice a fearful thought, you have already weakened it. Every act of mindfulness is an act of faith, quietly saying, I am not what I fear. Awareness is prayer without words, presence that keeps the night outside. Fact 86. The theologian Origen believed that even demons, in the end, could not escape divine love. He taught that all creation would one day be restored to harmony, that nothing born of God could remain lost forever. This belief, called apokatastasis, saw redemption as inevitable, not optional. For Origen, punishment was never final, it was purification. He imagined a universe so vast in mercy that even darkness would someday remember the light. His vision was daring, a hope beyond fear. Whether literal or symbolic, it reminds us that love's reach knows no limit. In time, all things return to their source. Even shadows, he said, long for dawn. Fact 87. In the Hebrew scriptures, the prophet Elijah met no demon but his own despair. He fled into the wilderness, begging for death, until a still, small voice asked, "What are you doing here?" The voice wasn't thunder or flame, it was gentleness. And in that moment, Elijah understood that the true enemy was hopelessness. The whisper of God was softer than fear, but stronger than it. That same whisper remains today, patient in every heart that feels alone. It doesn't command, it comforts. And when you finally listen, you realize what you thought was silence was always love speaking quietly. Fact 88. In early Christian writings, it was said that demons cannot comprehend humility because they have forgotten dependence. They crave control, while saints delight in surrender. The proud soul closes itself, but the humble one becomes vast, wide enough for heaven to enter. Humility, they taught, is the soul's natural gravity, pulling it back toward the light. It grounds faith, cools pride, and turns every breath into prayer. Where arrogance builds walls, humility opens windows. The angels dwell with those who bow low, not in shame, but in reverence. For where the heart yields, grace flows freely, and darkness has nothing left to hold. Fact 89. The Gospel of Mark describes a moment when Jesus rebukes a demon, and it departs crying out in defeat. The people are astonished, not by violence, but by authority. His command was calm, without struggle, spoken as truth to illusion. This became the model for spiritual strength, quiet conviction rooted in peace. To know the truth of God is to speak with the same authority. Demons yield to certainty, not noise. When the heart stands firm in faith, no darkness can endure. Power is not found in shouting, but in remembering who you are, a child of light, untouchable, eternal, and free. Fact 90. In monastic writings, monks describe the heart as an altar. Each thought placed upon it becomes an offering, holy or profane. They said demons cannot enter a heart already filled with prayer. To keep the altar lit, they repeated the same short prayer through the day, letting it become breath itself. Over time, their heartbeat and prayer beat became one rhythm. This was how they lived untroubled, even in wilderness. The lesson endures. If your heart stays devoted, the world cannot invade it. Keep the lamp of prayer burning quietly inside. Its steady flame keeps the shadows away. Fact 91. In many faiths, demons were said to thrive in isolation. They sought the lonely and the disconnected, not because solitude is evil, but because despair loves silence without meaning. The early believers countered this with community. They gathered, sang, shared bread, and reminded one another that no soul stands alone. Fellowship itself was considered a form of exorcism, love embodied in friendship. They understood that darkness fades fastest in company. Every kind word, every shared prayer is a light kindled in another heart. When souls stand together, even quietly, they become a constellation of faith, a sky no shadow can cover. Fact 92. In Jewish folklore, there is a saying that a demon cannot cross a door marked with peace. Homes were blessed with mezuzahs, small scrolls containing holy words, placed by the door. It wasn't the object that protected, but the remembrance it carried. Each time someone entered or left, they touched it and whispered a prayer. The act itself rekindled awareness of God's presence. Peace, they believed, was the true barrier, not a wall of stone, but a posture of heart. Where peace abides, no darkness can dwell. A tranquil soul is stronger than any fortress. It stands guarded by remembrance. Fact 93. The Christian mystic Catherine of Siena wrote, that the devil's greatest fear is a joyful heart united with God's will. She said such a soul dances through trials the way a flame dances in wind, bending but never breaking. Joy, she taught, is not born from pleasure but from surrender. When you rest completely in divine love, no storm can steal your peace. The demons rage because they cannot comprehend contentment. Joy unmoved by circumstance is heaven's laughter echoing through the world. To smile in faith when everything trembles is to remind creation who truly reigns. Fact 94. In the ancient world, many believed that demons lurked in the night, but mystics redefined the darkness, not as evil, but as the unseen face of God. They said the night is when faith learns to see without eyes. Stars appear only in darkness. Likewise, trust appears only in uncertainty. So they lit lamps, not to chase the dark away, but to bless it. Each candle was a symbol of courage, small, steady, and serene. They taught that true strength is not in the brightness of day, but in the quiet endurance of night. Even the shadows, they said, are made of light misunderstood. Fact 95. In Orthodox tradition, it's said that demons fear confession because honesty breaks their hold. They thrive in secrecy, feeding on shame. But when truth is spoken, even trembling, their power dissolves. Confession, they taught, is not humiliation, but liberation. It's the act of opening a window in a room long closed. The light that enters is not judgment, but mercy. When the soul admits its wounds, healing begins. The mystics called this bringing the darkness into daylight. For what is confessed cannot control, and what is seen cannot hide. Truth once spoken becomes freedom. Fact 96. Saint Seraphim of Sarov once said, "Acquire peace and thousands around you will be saved." He believed the soul's calm radiates outward, touching others unseen. Demons, he said, flee not from strength but from serenity. When a person becomes still, they mirror heaven itself. Peace is not passivity, it is divine authority without anger. The saints changed the world not by force, but by the gravity of their tranquility. They became walking sanctuaries, reminders that God dwells where hearts are quiet. To keep your peace is to guard a light that warms every soul near you. Fact 97. In the writings of the Church Fathers, demons were said to tremble before the virtue of patience. Impatience was their favorite tool, for it made souls act without thought and speak without love. But patience, they said, is heaven's tempo, the slow, steady rhythm of trust. When a person waits with faith, the enemy grows restless. Patience is not weakness, it is strength under silence. The saints compared it to a river carving stone. Gentle, yet unstoppable, the impatient heart stumbles, but the patient one endures. And in that endurance, every trial loses its sting, and peace takes root forever. Fact 98. In Hindu epics, the demons or asuras were not purely evil. They were seekers who lost their way. They sought immortality without wisdom, power without purity. The gods fought them not out of hatred, but to restore balance. The sages interpreted this as a metaphor for the human mind. Reason and desire must work together, or both become corrupted. Even in their defeat, the Asuras were not condemned. They were destined to return to the light in another age. This timeless story teaches that every fall is temporary. All beings, however lost, are walking home through cycles of remembrance. Fact 99. The mystic Thomas Merton once wrote that the devil's greatest victory is to convince us that peace is impossible. He said that in truth, peace is our natural state. It returns the moment we stop chasing control. War and hatred are surface storms. Beneath them, the ocean of the soul remains calm. Demons stir only waves, never the depths. To descend into silence is to rediscover still waters untouched by fear. Merton called this the hidden ground of love, where all conflict dissolves. He reminded the weary that peace is not something you must find. It is something you remember. Fact 100. Across every age and culture, the lesson remains the same. Demons lose their power when the heart remembers love. Fear divides, love restores. Darkness isolates, love unites. The saints, sages, and seekers all discovered this. Evil cannot survive where compassion is practiced. No chant or ritual carries greater strength than a single act of mercy. When you forgive, you reclaim your light. When you love, you disarm the night. The ancients called this the great secret, that goodness is not fragile, it is eternal, and the soul that walks in love walks unharmed, for no darkness can touch the flame that burns in peace. And now the night grows still again. You have wandered through 100 gentle truths, from the ancient deserts to quiet monasteries, from whispered prayers to the silence that conquers fear. You have seen that what we once called demons are not always monsters, but mirrors, reflections of the parts of us still longing for light. In every shadow hides a lesson, and in every lesson a path back to peace. So as you rest, remember this. You are not at war with the dark. You are simply learning to see the light within it. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the stories settle like dust after rain. The same divine presence that watched over saints and seekers now watches over you. You are safe. You are seen. You are loved. Deeply, eternally, completely. If this journey brought calm to your heart, remember to like this video and subscribe to Pilgrimage to God for more sacred bedtime reflections each week. And when you're ready for the next story, let your spirit follow the light. Click the video on your screen and continue your quiet walk through faith. Because there we discover 100 sleepy facts about the Holy Bible. Rest well, beloved soul, for even the night belongs to God, and every shadow, every one, will one day remember how to shine.